Hey, St. Luke's family, it's David. It's Friday afternoon, and I am here with you to check in about the state of church and gathering and all that it seems, given all that we're looking at, about what we will be up to for the next while. In the process of preparing to check back in with you, I have been thinking a lot about home. Uh, we're spending a lot of our time during these pandemic days safely at our homes, and the process of doing that for me and maybe for you has made it become clear that there are also other places from which we like our homes of residence. We draw comfort, in which we find trust and safety, to which we feel a sense of belonging. And staying at our homes all the time is making it somehow even more clear that true home is bigger than just where we reside. Maybe it's a network of pathways and places through which we move and feel like our full selves. St. Luke's is a place where many of us find ourselves at home, myself included. And for months now, we haven't been able to go to that place we call home or be in the presence of those church people who help us feel at home. So if you're like me, you're homesick. And while we yearn to go back home, the church place, the campus, remains suspended for gathering, and it would seem, from the look of things, will need to be so for a while longer. We might remember that, as we said in our what we called guiding principles during coronavirus, we said expressly that our Christian faith compels us in a time like this to be vigilant, cautious, compassionate, and patient. Following the mind and heart of Jesus, we measure risk in consideration of ourselves and what's right for us, but also in terms of the vulnerable and marginalized. And we acknowledged at the beginning of this pandemic in that guiding document that we would take our cues for regathering together from the risks posed by coronavirus, which could be mitigated by treatments or vaccinations, but also by the potential for community spread to become minimal. We suspected back in April at their adoption that with protective measures widely in effect at the time, that gathering could remain risky to do as long as through July, we speculated at the time. And now here we are approaching the end of July, and we all know that COVID-19 is still on the rise here in Georgia and in Metro Atlanta. And so it's not yet right or safe to start regathering, and our in-person activities are going to need to remain suspended. Though we are hopeful, every day we are hopeful that conditions will improve so that small gatherings can be considered. And now our hopeful look and preparations are with the possibility that small gatherings might be considered as soon as late September. But while suspended from gathering at the place we call home, we are, as you all know, and are actively consuming, even here with me now in this Facebook check-in, while we're suspended in place, we are making ourselves at home in the Spirit. We're living in the connections we have with each other. We're doing that by calls and cards and online gatherings, including our worship on Sundays. And we continue to be passionate and safe in our outreaching lives. We're supporting Family Promise guests sheltering in place at the church. We're serving poor and jobless through Community Assistance Center. We even have built, during this pandemic, we have built a flourishing new feeding ministry with the help of our sibling congregation, Dodd Sterling United Methodist that this week on Tuesday served 160 households with food security, so they wouldn't have to wait in any other risky food pantry lines, but could have enough to get by. We've taken up in this time commitments to anti-racism, learning and work, investing in this time of reflection for the sake of the better people we can yet become with God's help and the better world we know God wants us to help make. So in making ourselves at home in this strange moment, in these strange ways we have to do, we've discovered that God is doing new things with us. We're discovering along the way that church online activities have an awful lot to offer, and many of those will be here to stay even after we start gathering back in person together. Engagement with St. Luke's is high, and so we have discovered in this time that St. Luke's really has never closed. The building took a pause, but the Spirit of Christ has stayed active among us. The Spirit of Christ never recedes, and no virus can hold the Spirit back. And so while we make ourselves at home by living in these connections we have to make right now, St. Luke's is also actively watching and preparing for regathering as soon as it is possibly safe to do so. And we expect regathering during pandemic will need to start very slow and carefully, starting only with safe practicing small groups, which we now hope will happen sometime in September. We believe it'll be safe to consider those small in-person gatherings after we see measurably several weeks of sustained decline in community spread, which we've now come to understand with the help of public health professionals is measured by them with something called infection rate. So with the help of learning from epidemiologists and those developing the public health science around this moment we're all in together, we're learning about community spread, how it's measured and interpreted, and as a result we're following not only counts like positive tests and hospitalizations, but we're also following perhaps even more intently now measures of how quickly the virus is spreading, or what's referred to as the infection rate. And we're following this resource called RT Live that has become a guiding focus for our understanding the coronavirus infection rate, which measures the average number of people who become infected by one infectious person. When that rate is above 1, when one infectious person is infecting more than one other person, that community spread is on the rise. And when that rate is below 1, that community spread is on the decline. So these graphs, we've looked at them every once in a while, but these graphs are measures of infection rate on RT Live. We'll send you the link so that you can follow along for yourselves. But you can see where Georgia is, right? Georgia's right here in the middle of the red zone, which is not the zone we want to be in. That's the above 1 infection rate zone. But we're following that intently on a daily basis so that we can eventually observe its decline. And once we see weeks of sustained decline in that infection rate, which has happened already when we were collectively sheltering and practicing safe measures. You can see from this right over here, you can see we were doing really well for a while when we were collectively sheltering and taking safety measures. That's when the curve was flattening in coronavirus spread. That curve stopped flattening after things started getting looser, including safe practices. But we have shown that we can do it, and we need to do it again. And when we do, when we turn things around, and when community spread is once again brought under 1 and under control, we can start to move as a church to the place we dearly want to go together. So if you regularly, like me, ask yourself, well, when can church gatherings start back? You can follow this URL for yourself, rt.live. and watch Georgia turn from red to a sustained green below 1. And then we will already be prepared for the things for which we've been praying, gathering in person again to start slowly but surely. So spread is not yet declining, but if those trends turn around, we can and are already preparing to return to small, safe gathering church. We're preparing for phase 1 of regathering already, with that hope and timeline in mind, targeting sometime in September for small, safe gatherings to resume. And we're also, we're preparing for phase 1 very intently, but we're also, we've already begun preparations for phase 3. You know, we've talked about how worship will be one of the last things that's safe to resume in a corporate way. But we're already preparing the sanctuary for corporate worship to resume as soon as is safely possible. So while we are continuing to monitor community spread and prepare for safe gathering, starting with small groups, but ultimately resulting in a return to worship in the sanctuary, we are also learning and exploring safe practices in this COVID era. A couple weeks ago, you might have seen, we did a pilot drive-through ice cream event for families with children. It was carefully devised and implemented and happened to perfectly safe and great effect. Everyone was kept safe and fun was had. So we are also, while we are waiting for the in-person gathering green light, we're actively exploring events connected to the church campus and to each other that are safe to do. And we will plan to do more of them, because I know we all yearn for, want to feel that connectedness to the place again that we feel like home. So at least for a while longer, home isn't where we want to go and find it, because home is elusive when it comes to the church campus right now. What we want from it isn't presently available, but the powerful good news in all of this is that while we wait, we can still find ourselves at home in St. Luke's Church. And in this sense, I think maybe at this wondrous and anxious time, we discover that maybe home is not something necessarily that we go to or even live in, but something that lives in us. I think this is where the wonderful spiritual message in all of this is for us, because God is teaching us in these times. It feels so sure. And one of those teachings must be that true home is God's love come to dwell in us and come alive in us. As John gave witness in the first letter that he wrote, if we love one another, God lives in us, because we've been given God's Spirit. Those who abide in love, or those who live in love, those who find their home in love, abide in God, and God abides in them. God finds home in us through love. This is what we are discovering to be true in new ways at this time, while we expectantly wait to return home to church, and we will do so anxiously and eagerly. Let's also remember that true home, by golly and by God, it never ever leaves us. And praise be for that. Y'all take care. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Sunday. God bless. Bye-bye.